How are we doing, ladies and gentlemen? We are in the dead of the offseason right now with most teams' rosters more or less finalized. There are still some standing free agents out there, and things remain in limbo with the trade request for Damian Lillard and James Harden, which has put a lot of things on hold for the league while they see how the situations shake out. So because of all that, and because it's been a long time since I've done one of these when I used to do them every week, I thought it would be a good time to go over your guys' Bulls hot takes to get you guys involved into the content, and also my reaction to your takes. And that's what we'll be talking about in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. If you are new to the channel, I occasionally do hot take reaction videos, so feel free to drop your takes in the comments to be included in future videos. Also, if you are new, consider subscribing if you like Bulls content. About 55% of you watching are not subscribed, so it would mean a great deal to me to help the channel grow, and I'll be sure to keep putting out content like this for you guys. But anyway, let's get into some of these takes. First, we've got Noah Humsky. The reason why the Bulls haven't gone into a full rebuild is because they believe they can get Anthony Davis in free agency next offseason. If he declines his player option, he'll become an unrestricted free agent, and with LeBron leaving to go play with his kid, both leaving is extremely likely. This is an interesting take. I like it. Not sure I entirely agree with it, but I like it. You are correct in that AD will have a player option on the final year of his deal after this season. I do agree it's very likely he declines that option to get a bigger, longer-term deal, whether it be with the Lakers or with another team. And yes, LeBron has stated he's going to be playing wherever his son gets drafted. LeBron also has a player option after this season, and yes, it's very likely both could be leaving. That said, I'm probably in the minority in this view, but I personally think the Lakers are going to do everything in their power to get Bronny James so they can keep LeBron until he retires, trading with whatever team ends up drafting him, even if it means giving up a fair amount of assets to do so, because they know LeBron and his son together, playing together on the same team, is going to be box office for ticket sales, even if it means the team isn't necessarily a title contender. And if that does happen, then I see it being more likely that Anthony Davis picks up his player option to stay with the Lakers or opts out and re-signs with them for a longer-term deal. That said, though, going back to your comment around the Bulls not rebuilding because they're wanting to wait on AD to become a free agent so they can pick him up, no, I actually think that it's very unlikely. I mean, the Bulls are not rebuilding because they're clinging onto this roster that they put together and doubling down on some of their mistakes because they have a hard time admitting that they were wrong. They wouldn't just hold off on doing a rebuild in the hopes that they could somehow snag away Anthony Davis when they don't have control on whether or not he would in fact become a free agent. And really the biggest issue, the Bulls wouldn't be able to afford Davis, signing him outright as a free agent since they're already over the cap, even if they let DeMar walk. That's not going to free up enough cap space to sign a player like Anthony Davis. It would have to be done via a sign and trade where one of Vuce or even Zach Lavine would have to be included to even make the money work. Next, we've got Viper Strike 0. I really don't like how they changed these to the @user names, but anyway, this person says, I think our team is better now heading into this season than we were heading into the 21 season. My reasoning is that last year they beat good teams over and over even though they had a better record in 21-22. It was mostly on the back of beating bad teams but struggling against good teams. So I'm fully of the belief that this team will be better going into the season than they were last year. I'm not going to say they'll be leaps and bounds better, but they made moves that should improve their shot profile and bringing in defensive tenacity, and I do think there is something to be said about the way the Bulls played better towards the end of the year and hopefully carrying that into next season with the new additions to the team. Now, better than heading into the 21-22 season, I have a hard time agreeing with that when they're not going to have Lonzo Ball. Yes, Javon Carter is a solid pickup because of his outside shooting and perimeter defense, but he's not Lonzo. And I have a hard time seeing this team getting out to the best record in the East like they initially did in 21-22 when they had Lonzo Ball. But you are right in that the Bulls played significantly better against better teams in the league, and if they can just improve in finishing games against some of the worst teams in the NBA, something they couldn't do last year, then that should have a significant impact on their record. We'll have to see if that happens, though. Next, we've got Geo6676. Jerry Reinsdorf gives AK the green light to go into the luxury tax after the Bulls sneak into the 6th seed in early January, for which they pick up Kelly Oubre, and come All-Star break, we get word that Lonzo Ball is making a miraculous recovery and will be right to play the last 10 games of the season and playoffs. So a few things here. One, I don't think being the 6th seed is going to be enough for Jerry to give AK the green light and going into the tax, especially when he's only ever pay the tax once in history. It really would have to be something like the Bulls shocking everyone and sitting in the top 3 in the East, and it looks like they have a legit chance to contend. And even then, I still have a hard time seeing them go into the luxury tax just based on their history. The other thing, Kelly Oubre is not the type of player you go into the luxury tax for, and I doubt he stays a free agent with no team picking him up even through January. And then you also mentioned Lonzo Ball and him recovering, playing towards the end of the season because he recovers well. I don't know this for sure, but I'm 95% sure that since the Bulls applied for the disabled player exception and it was approved by the league, even if Lonzo somehow does make this miraculous recovery and he's actually healthy and cleared to play by the end of the season, I believe he wouldn't be able to because the Bulls used the disabled player exception for his salary, so he wouldn't be able to play this season regardless of how he recovers. Next, we've got SportsVids268. Jevon Carter will be the most underrated free agent signing and averaged 12 points per game, 5 assists, and 1.5 steals as the starter this year. Well, I've said before, this could go down as one of the more underrated signings of this offseason across the league, not even just for the Bulls, but really the entire NBA. And really, it's for the amount they were able to sign him for and why it's such a bargain deal. I'm not really into predicting numbers for how he's going to show up, although I do think 12 points per game is pretty high when you consider that as of right now, the Bulls still have Lavine, DeMar, and Vucevic, and you would have to assume Pat and Coby are going to be taking a fair amount of shots as well. Carter is going to get a lot of open looks from 3. Given DeMar and Zach will be able to draw defenses away from Carter, allowing him to space the floor, but 12 points per game is a bit of a stretch. 5 assists and 1.5 steals? Yeah, sure, I can see that. Next, we've got Spitfire 1940. The Bulls will end up with the 5th seed in the East and will make the second round thanks to an improved P. Will and a more fleshed out starting 5 thanks to Jevon Carter having another amazing season alongside Zach, DeMar, and Vucevic. I mean, the tough thing to predict about this season is it's really up in the air. Like, yeah, I could see the Bulls finishing with the 5th seed if everything goes right and guys like Pat take a big leap in performance. And like you said, the addition of Carter helps out more than initially expected. But I could also see this team finishing 10th again, or even slightly lower if things really go south, and also just considering the competition in the Eastern Conference, as a lot of teams improve their roster or were already significantly better than the Bulls anyway. So it's tough to say, and yeah, putting the Bulls as a 5th seed is definitely a hotter take, but I could honestly see it happening depending on how these guys show up and if their best players can get their act together. In contrast to that take, though, we have Dontavius Stapleton, who says the Bulls will not make a jump in the standings. Yes, the moves should help improve the roster, but I see Milwaukee, Boston, Philly, Miami, New York, Cleveland, Atlanta as 7 teams better than the Bulls. Then you also got young teams like Indy, Orlando, Detroit, who all got better, and I could see 2 of those 3 teams take a leap, especially Indy. I think the Bulls still probably won't make the playoffs. So while I agree that a lot of these teams that you mentioned as they stand right now are better than the Bulls, at the same time though, I wouldn't be shocked if one of them struggles and falls in the standings. Every year, there was always 1 or 2 teams that has these high expectations and then they come up short, whether it be from injuries, general team chemistry, and locker room issues. Like every year when we predict the conference standings going into the preseason, there are always these outliers where we're like, man, we were way off on those. Think of a team like the Dallas Mavericks, who no one would have predicted to finish 11th in the West before the start of last season, or the Miami Heat to finish 7th in the East and ultimately 8th after the play-in, or even the Bulls finishing 10th. But despite there always being those surprises that we don't foresee, I do think they'll ultimately make the playoffs as one of the lower seeds. I would be shocked if the Bulls stay flat and miss the playoffs yet again, and if they do, then yeah, some serious changes need to be made, including to the coaching staff. Next, we've got Biased Films. Patrick Williams is destined to become an average role player, not a number 4 pick. I've always said we need to start putting the fact that this man was a number 4 pick aside, because the more we cling on to that, the more we place these high expectations on him, especially when he was in a weak draft class. The guy who went number 2 was even worse. And then there have also been a lot of top 5 picks over the years who haven't amounted to much more than just being role players in the NBA. That said though, no, I do still think Pat will be more than just a role player in this league. He has the skills, all the intangibles, and the potential for being a great two-way player. It's just a matter of getting over the mental side of the game for him and to not be so timid and passive and start playing with confidence. He's still only 21. Just remember that. Next up, we've got Chats. The Bulls shouldn't start a rebuild until after the season the Spurs own their draft rights to our first round pick. I disagree there. The Bulls should absolutely look to rebuild if this season proves to be just another repeat of last year, or if it's not much better anyway. The other thing is that the pick they owe to the Spurs is for 2025, so that would mean the Bulls should not do any kind of rebuild both at some point this season and next season, which just doesn't make sense. I mean, if the team continues to struggle, at some point you don't worry about one draft pick and potentially losing it. You focus on what you need to do for the long term and changing this team right away. The other thing is that pick that they owe to the Spurs in 2025 is top 10 protected. So if they were to rebuild, they would be more likely to keep that pick than if they tried to still remain competitive. Obviously, this is all subject to change. If somehow the Bulls do come out in this upcoming season and the following season and they start looking like a contending team, because if they do start to somehow look like a contending team, then there would be no need to do a full-blown rebuild. Anyway, guys, I'll end it there for this edition of Your Bulls Hot Takes. Feel free to leave your takes below in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.